you said that there's this conscious choice or unconscious choice as to how we live. It seems like most of us are unconscious of these choices that are available to us. And I'll even add to this that I think there's a segment of the population, and it might be a pretty big segment of the population around the world, that is unaware of what love and joy looks like.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. And it's not connected to socioeconomic status at all. In fact, some of the developed countries are the ones that have the most angst and the most lack of happiness, because there's a big gap between what they expect from life and what is the reality of their experiences day to day. So the smaller the gap, the greater the happiness. I think one of the issues is that we are born, with some genetics, but more like a tabula rasa of love. And over time, the external world comes at us, and we create moats around us, moats of fear that prevent us from experience ourselves fully because we're scared. And the attachments are all undergirded by some kind of fear that we develop over time. And so the more we can get in touch with those fears and experience them in an active awareness kind of way, at least it gives us a better chance to unleash them and liberate ourselves from them.
What do you mean by the word attachment?
As I said, attachment is a mental baggage that we carry. We get attached to ideas, ideals, behaviors, stories that we've created to ourselves that are negative. Now, we have a whole science about positive attachments. I'm not talking about those. I'm talking about the negative attachments. And over time, as we reinforce those attachments, we create kind of like a psychological cancer inside of our minds that weighs us down and gets in the way of us being happy and joyful. So that's really what I see as an attachment. And I identified 10 of them.
And what are those 10?
The 10 are: 1, the attachment to stability, the attachment to the past, the attachment to the future, the attachment to control, to perfection, the attachment to success, the attachment to pleasure, the attachment to youth, the attachment to yourself, and the attachment to life. And each one of these attachments has an aspiration on the other side of the continuum that pulls you out of the attachment. So just to give one example, the attachment to the past. We harbor memories, trauma, relationships that went sour, business deals that didn't work, and we create stories about them, and they weigh us down. Well, the way to get out of that is to forgive. And many of us have difficulty forgiving because we can't get in touch with the fear behind the anger.
Early in the book, you say, we all start out on the same journey toward the same destination. If we're lucky, our first attachments are formed early on with our parents. And then you go on to say, we veer off course. Often we do. How do so many of us veer off course?
Well, I think there are probably 3 reasons. One is that we're afraid of our fears, and we run away from our fears. And that is exactly the opposite of what we should be doing. That's the first thing. The second thing is that, as you mentioned, most of our thinking is unconscious. And so if we can make our thinking 1 to 2% more conscious, more self-aware of what's going on, how we are feeling, the impact that we're having on other people, it can free us. And the third thing is that many people, as a result of going through life, don't love themselves. And I think that self-love is probably one of the most important aspects of mental well-being. And I don't mean narcissistic love. I mean self-love where you have the resilience, the confidence, the courage, and the ability to do what you can, want what you have, and be who you are. And so I think loving yourself and being yourself are very, very important in life.
Are we born to love ourselves? Or is that something that we learn and we're taught by our parents? Or how does that come about?
Well, I think we're dealt 4 cards in the poker game of life. We're dealt genetics, and people have a biological happiness set point, and it influences 30 to 40% of our overall happiness based on the chemistry and the electricity in our brain. The second card is our early life experiences. And it's very difficult for kids to take perspective because they are evolving in their cognitive development. And the first phase of life is that you can't individuate and separate yourself from the outside world. And so you feel that you're responsible for how the world shows up in your life. And so it has a natural way of putting you down. And you have to work hard at loving yourself, and you have to have good parenting and a healthier environment. The third poker chip is life experiences, and they show up in varied ways, and some are good and some are bad. The healthiest among us develop resilience. We have a capacity to adapt. Our brains are constantly evolving and changing. But when we have fear in our life, they don't change as much. We get stuck in the fear. It's like glue. And we don't rid ourselves of that. So I think, and then the fourth one is just our overall personality that develops. And so how we manage those poker chips are really important. We can't change our genetics, but we can change our interpretation of our early experiences. We can change our interpretation of our life experiences, and we can change how we show up in the world. And all of that is around conscious volition.